King Arthur. I mean, you know the name, right? It's got to be one of the most famous names ever. This figure has fascinated people for, gosh, centuries. But here's the thing. Behind that whole legend of the Shining King, was there a real guy? That's what we're going to dig into. We're going to try and separate the man from the myth.
Yeah, you know the stuff. The magical sword, Excalibur, the Knights of the Round Table, and of course the legendary castle of Camelot. These are really the building blocks of the story we all have in our heads.
So, that gets us to the big question, the one we're all here for. Was the guy at the center of all this? Was he a real person, a historical figure? Or is he just, a made-up character? To figure that out, we're going to have to put on our detective hats.
Okay, so first things first. If we want to find the real Arthur, we've got to start with the one we're all familiar with. The pop culture king you see in all the movies and books.
And this is him, right? The noble king of England, a champion of chivalry, searching for the Holy Grail, the whole shebang. But, and this is super important to remember, this Arthur, he's a literary figure. He's a character in a story.
All right, so our investigation officially begins. What we're going to do is peel back the layers of this legend one by one. We're literally going to travel backward in time to see how this story got built, storyteller by storyteller.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with those romantic stories from the 12th century, then peel back the layers to the 1100s, and just keep digging, all the way down to the very first time we see Arthur's name pop up, way back in the 9th century.
Okay, first stop on our journey, 12th century France. We meet this writer, Chrétien de Troyes. And honestly, this guy is the source for so much of what we think of as Arthurian. I mean, he's the one who invented Lancelot, and the whole quest for the Holy Grail, that was him too. But here's the key. He never ever tried to say Arthur was real. For him, Arthur was just the perfect hero for his awesome fictional stories.
But Chrétien didn't actually come up with Arthur himself. Nope, he borrowed him from another writer. And this other writer, well, he was the one who tried to pass his fiction off as cold, hard fact.
And that brings us to Geoffrey of Monmouth. So around the year 1136, he writes this massive book, The History of the Kings of Britain. And he makes this incredible claim. He says, I'm just translating a very ancient, secret book I found. He really wanted people to believe this was actual history.
But here's the catch. Historians, both back then and today, pretty much all agree Geoffrey's book is a brilliant piece of historical fiction. I mean, the guy was a genius at it. He'd mix real people and places with stuff he just totally made up, all to create this grand, epic story for Britain. His Arthur, this guy who conquers half of Europe, he's a character, not some long-lost king from an ancient text.
Okay, so if Geoffrey was basically writing a novel, where did he get the name Arthur? Good question. To answer that, we have to go back even further. Before the fancy books, back to the stories people were just telling each other. We're talking about the oral traditions and myths of Wales.
And what's fascinating is that in these old Welsh myths, Arthur is, well, he's all over the place. He's not one consistent character. In one story, he's this amazing hero with superhuman strength. In the next, he's a cruel, greedy tyrant. It's a huge clue, really. It tells us the Welsh probably weren't talking about one real guy, but more of a folk hero figure who could be shaped to fit whatever the storyteller wanted.
Okay, let's recap. We've peeled back the layer of French romance. We've peeled back the English historical fiction. We've even gone past those shifting Welsh myths. And now we've reached it. The oldest major text we have that really put the name Arthur on the map.
This is a text called the Historia Brittonum, the History of the Britons, written around 829 AD. Now, you hear history in the title and you think, great, facts. But nope, this thing wasn't really a history book. It was basically political propaganda written to make the Welsh kings of the time look good by connecting them to this awesome line of past heroes.
And this is where things get really interesting, maybe the biggest twist of all. In this oldest source, Arthur isn't a king, not even close. He's not royal at all. He's called a dux bellorum in Latin. And what does that mean? It means leader of battles. Think warlord or supreme commander.
Yeah, the Historia Brittonum doesn't give us a whole life story. No Camelot, no Round Table. It just gives us a military resume. It says this leader of battles, Arthur, won 12 incredible victories for the Britons against the invading Saxons. And that's it. That's the oldest, most solid-seeming claim about him that exists.
12 victories.
I mean, that sounds pretty specific, right? This could be it. This could be the historical core we've been looking for. But does it actually hold up when you start to investigate?
And this, my friends, is where the whole thing just completely falls apart. Historians have been able to identify a few of these 12 battles, and when they do, oh boy. That famous Battle of Badon? Yeah. Other historical sources say that was won by a guy named Ambrosius Aurelianus. What about the Battle of Chester, fought by a King Seliph, 100 years later? And get this, it wasn't even a victory, it was a defeat, and King Seliph died in it. The Battle of Bruin, that was won by yet another leader, a guy named Urien.
So, you see the problem. It is literally biologically impossible for one person to have fought in battles that are 100 years apart. Those 12 battles, they're not the career of one man. They're a greatest hits album, a highlight reel of different victories, won by different people, all just slapped together and credited to this one character named Arthur. At this point, the trail for a single historical person has gone completely cold.
So, if there was no one guy named Arthur who did all this, does that mean the whole story is just nothing? Made up out of thin air? No, not at all. It just means we've been asking the wrong question this whole time.
The answer, it turns out, is that Arthur isn't one man. He's a composite character. The person who wrote the Historia Brittonum basically built him like a Frankenstein's monster of heroism. They took the victories from real leaders like Ambrosius and Urien. They borrowed the military title from King Seliph. They found this kind of rare name, Arthur, from somewhere else, and they stitched it all together to create this one perfect, superhuman hero for their political story.
So, when you get right down to it, searching for the one, single, real King Arthur, it's a dead end. But a much more interesting question, a much more fascinating one, is what were the inspirations? Who were the real people? What were the real events that got all mixed and mashed together to create this legendary character in the first place?
And this is pretty much where historians have landed on the subject. You've got guys like John Davies and T. Charles Edwards who basically said, look, maybe there was some original warrior who kicked this all off, but his real identity is buried under so many centuries of storytelling and myth that we know absolutely nothing about him. He's basically been lost to time.
Which kind of leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? The legend of Arthur wasn't built on one man. It was built on the courage and victories of many real warriors. All of their stories combined to create this ideal. So maybe the question isn't really about historical fact at all. Maybe it's about what makes a hero. Does a hero really have to be just one person to be real?